Hi and welcome back to Small Caps. My name is Jess Fertig and today I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing Andrew Vigar, who is the chairman of Terra Uranium Limited. The ASX ticker code is T92. Hi Andrew, it's so great to see you back on Small Caps.
It's a pleasure to be back, Jess.
Now, Andrew, the last time we caught up, which was a couple of months ago, we were talking about the Ottery tin mine. And today I want to chat a little bit about this recent cap raise that you've just done and also a brand new acquisition. Congratulations.
Thanks very much, Jess. Yes, it's a big move for us. So we'd moved into northeastern New South Wales, into the New England area, and had picked up Ottery, which is a great little tin project, right next door to First Tin, who are developing the Taronga project, which they're going through the permitting for now. Should be in construction next year. That's a major development for them. But now, having been in the area and looking at other opportunities, we were offered another project nearby. It's an earlier stage project because it has had no production in the past, and it's slightly different geology, sort of similar related geology, but this one has a tungsten molybdenum tin sort of focus and a bit of bismuth as well. So it's the same system, just a slightly different part of it. But what had really attracted us was the size and scale of this deposit. It's been known about since the 60s. It's a major system. It's about 50 kilometres to the southeast of Ottery. It's called Glen Eden. It's right on the highway. It's right on the New England Highway, just south of Deepwater, north of Glen Innes. It's been known about, but has always been thought of as being a bit low grade. Big, but low grade. What I call a big dumb deposit. And we really like the big deposits because they're the ones that have potential to have scale and something of a decent size. But the grade's a little low. And we'll talk about that a little bit further when we get on to metallurgy. But it's a great project, and we're very delighted to be able to pick that up and along with that do a fundraising to fund the first round of work on it.
Yeah, so interesting, Andrew. And you mentioned that Glen Eden, this new acquisition that you've just, this new project that you've just acquired, is the largest undeveloped tungsten project in New South Wales. What's the timeline and the strategy for Terra Uranium to progress this towards a potential JORC compliant resource?
Yes, we'd very much like a JORC compliant resource, but as we all know, JORC rules are pretty tight. This project has had really no serious work done since 1983. There was a little bit done in 2006, but we're talking 40 years ago. All the data's out of date, although it's very good work, and the major bulk of the work, which was done originally by Mount Isa Mines and then followed up by Amoco, was very good quality work. So particularly coring, most of that early drilling was diamond core drilling to 385 metres depth, which is deep drilling. It was excellent quality work, but there has been very little since. So in order to move that to compliance, we're going to concentrate initially on the shallow part, which is potentially a simple open cut, down to 100, 150 metres. We've put a preliminary target on that of 20 to 30 million tonnes of ore, which is a nice size deposit, but realising that it's been drilled to 385 metres, which is 4 times that depth. So we're looking at longer term scale of potentially an underground or a much larger open cut, but we'll concentrate on that shallow stuff first. So the first round of work will be just simply to bring everything up to date, do some shallow work, confirm that the old work was of good quality, which we believe it is, and that all depends on permitting, which we'll talk about again in a second. But we are in New South Wales. It's a very strict regime as far as permitting. We have to go through native title and various other things. So it's going to take us many months. I'd very much like to be on the ground drilling by Christmas, but it all depends on how this process takes, especially the native title part, which is a fixed time frame. You can't negotiate that one away. It's a fixed 4-month time frame. And that's assuming it passes. So it'll be late this year or early next year.
So interesting, Andrew. And the company appears to be building its portfolio with some really interesting assets. What strategic value do you think this Glen Eden project brings to the company and to its existing portfolio, particularly alongside the Ottery tin mine, which you also, sort of recently acquired as well?
It's a good point. Ottery is not quite as large a project as Glen Eden, but then it has a shorter path to actual production because we have first tin operating within 10 k's of us. It is an old mine that's had extensive workings in the past, and the scale of it is a lot less. So you could probably bring that up online a lot quicker as just basically an ore feed into Taronga. Glen Eden is a much larger project, so we'll have a longer time frame. But if we can prove it up to be as good as we think it is, then that's a major project. So that's a project of state significance and probably even Australia significance. So that means it has a longer time frame, but then is a lot more impact on the company. It's a company maker type project. It's a big one.
Yeah, so massive scale.
And we'll talk a little bit about why we think that, but it relates around metallurgy and also some modern processing techniques which have really come into the fore now in the last 10 to 20 years, originally out of South Africa, but use of things like ore sorters. And there's a company now out of Germany called Tomra who are really taking the lead on that. And we're taking an example from the Mount Carbine project in North Queensland at EQ Resources, where they're using ore sorters as essentially a beneficiation process between the open pit and the mill. The processing in the mill is your expensive step. Bulk mining is relatively cheap. If you can reject the majority of the material using sorting processes prior to the mill, that changes the economics. So that changes a large project which looks a bit low grade into a very, very attractive project because it's got the metal content. It's the bulk amount of metal in the project. And if we can cut the processing costs by using ore sorters, that makes a big difference. And on the front page of our press release, which just came out, you'll see there's some nice photographs in there of very, very coarse-grained wolframite and molybdenum, as in centimetres across, the size of your fist. Really, really coarse-grained mineralisation. So that's the stuff that sorts beautifully.
Yeah, that's so exciting, Andrew. I mean, the mining technology out there for ore scanning and, improving efficiencies and getting more and more ore out of a deposit is just, it's so interesting and such an exciting space. But I want to just find out a little bit more about the scale, the size of the project that you're talking about. Can you elaborate on that for us, and also the great potential that you see based on historical drilling and how it compares to similar mineralized deposits globally?
Yeah, it's an interesting point because it is a big system. So the actual alteration system, and remembering this one has had no modern mining. So there was quite a bit of mining 100 years ago on a very small scale, just mining some of the high-grade veins. But modern production, there's been none. So this is a project that's been, as I said, been known about. If you pull out the New South Wales tin tungsten projects of interest, you'll see it's right there on the list, and it's the largest tungsten project in New South Wales. So it's not as if it hasn't been known about. But the problem, as we said, was that the overall average grade, if we just bulk everything up and put it through a mill, it's pretty low. But we're looking at being a bit cleverer than that. The core of the deposit is about 500 metres diameter, 500 metres across. It's a very complicated multi-phase breccia rise and stockwork system. We're not going to solve that one in under a few years, but that's fine. We can still put numbers on it. As an overall target, but geologists as I am, we love this sort of stuff because you don't often get to see these exciting, strongly mineralized systems like this one. But it sits in a much larger alteration zone, which is of the order of a couple of kilometres across, so it's very large. And the host rock it's sitting in is volcanics. So all these things are driven by higher level intrusives. These are the apotheoses coming off the top. And you don't see any of the intrusions at all, which means they're all buried. And that's what we're looking for, because the best bits are the bits on the top. Normally they're eroded away and you're just looking at the roots of the system and the best stuff's gone. In Glen Eden's case, all that stuff's still there. So the depth potential is good, and the size of the system is large. On the other side of it, we're a small company. Drilling's expensive. So we would be looking at building this up and then probably partnering with a larger company to do something with it. But at this stage, as you said, JORC's the first step. I think we'll concentrate on the very shallow stuff, the top 100, 150 metres, which is obviously open cuttable, and also the metallurgy, which is the other one we'll do some test work on. I should just mention as well, for people who aren't familiar with tungsten, there are two main tungsten minerals. One of them's wolframite, and the other one's scheelite. Wolframite is a tungsten oxide, just like cassiterite is a tin oxide. Very easy to treat. You can pretty much whack it straight into the metallurgical process. Whereas scheelite is a calcium tungstate, so it has to be processed into what they call APT as an intermediate product in order to be able to be sold, because it's not in a form where you can use it directly in the metallurgical process. That means wolframite, basically, bottom line, it's worth more. So you might have the same tungsten as in WO3 content, but it's actually worth more because it's a directly saleable product. It's also a lot cheaper to treat. So our milling and beneficiation process is simpler. And the preliminary met work that was done back in the 1980s is very good. So we're getting good recoveries of tungsten, tin, bismuth, and molybdenum. I should also mention this deposit has a lot of molybdenum in it. Molybdenite is the mineral, and molybdenum's the element.
What are the applications of that, Andrew? For
it's mostly also used in steels.
Okay.
It's a hardening material in steels. It's used in stainless steel, but it's also used as a lubricant, surprisingly. A lot of these Magnatech things and stuff you see with oils and stuff, they actually put a little bit of molybdenum in there because it's very, very slippery, and it's metal, so it's good for your engine. It lubricates at the same time. It coats the inside of the engine, and it's like a molybdenum coating. You'll see it in spray oils and things like that as well. So and also in high demand, and both tungsten and moly, the biggest producers in the world, are coming out of China. There's a shortage in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And as we know, as global tensions are changing and things, particularly places like Europe are looking for sources of molybdenum, tungsten, tin from places like Australia.
Yeah. And we'll touch a little bit more on kind of the macro side of things and these metals a little bit later. But Andrew, how do you plan to fund further exploration and development, with the recent sort of $750,000 placement that you've just done? Will it be sufficient, do you think, for this next phase of work, given you've been talking about, exploration, you've got your met work, you want to prove up resource, put a JORC around this? Talk us through this.
It'll certainly be enough for us to kick off the process.
Yeah.
It won't be enough for us, I don't believe, to get to JORC as far as a JORC resource, because that's going to require substantial drilling, and that's expensive. We'll certainly be able to start met work. We'll be doing basic prospecting work over the tenements. We have another 60-odd prospects to look at, which are part of the package. They're much earlier stage. So we'll be doing some work on them, and we'll be doing some preliminary met work as well on surface samples that we can pick up easily, just to see if the ore sorting type approach is going to work. We're pretty sure it will, but we'll do some test work on that. I don't think it's going to get us to JORC because that'll need a drill campaign, and that's substantial. Whether we fund that ourselves or whether we go into partnership with somewhere else, that will depend on what happens over the next few months and what the board and the company feel about that. Our focus always is value for shareholders.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're a small company. Our funding routes are limited, but we're very fortunate to have got ourselves onto a project which is potentially world class. So that changes the paradigm for us. We expect to have people knocking on our door.
Yeah, absolutely, Andrew. And obviously this acquisition really diversifies Terra Uranium's portfolio even more. But what does this mean in terms of your continued presence in uranium, for example?
We call it critical metals, and of course uranium's one. Unfortunately in Australia it's not, but everywhere else in the world it is. And certainly in the US and Canada, uranium is very much on the critical metals list. And we've done enough work on those projects in Canada where we now have other major companies drilling them for us. So our funding requirements on those are pretty much zero. But there's major work coming, and shareholders can look forward to work happening in the second half of this year on drilling some of those targets. But as I said, not by us, by others. Those and again, they're in the similar sort of thing, potentially world-class deposits. That's what we're on about. And so there's work happening in Canada. Doug Engdale and Troy Marfleet are focused on those projects over there. They're Canadians. They're right on top of it. They're looking after our partners who are doing the work on those projects. So yes, still very active in those, but we don't need to fund it, which is great. So we're now looking at tin, tungsten, moly, more critical minerals in Australia, a bit closer to home, lower cost for us to work on. I can drive to these projects from my home. So that's a big advantage. When we get them to the stage of major capital costs, then we'll make a call then as to whether we do that work ourselves or whether we partner it using the sort of template as we've done in Canada. It's an interesting way to go, and it allows a small company to do big company work, if you like.
No, so interesting. Thanks, Andrew. And, you touched a little bit on the critical mineral focus globally, and obviously lots of macro tailwinds for critical minerals, particularly with China's export controls and tariffs and the like. After the fact, I think critical minerals have been a focus for some time, but just this year, there's been massive tailwinds for these commodities. And how is the company going to capitalize on potential government support, number one, and potential downstream demand for minerals like tungsten, tin, and moly, as you just mentioned?
Yeah, that's a good point, because the governments do come into it a little bit. We're applying for grants in Canada for uranium exploration, because they're strongly supporting that, and they actually do provide grants. Because, as I said, in Canada, uranium is a critical mineral. Unfortunately, in Australia, it's not, but tungsten is, and so are bismuth and moly. So it's quite. We would definitely be going down that path, looking for support from both the New South Wales and the Australian governments, because, as I said, this is a big deposit. It's relatively low grade, but it's big enough that the total metal content is very large. So we'd certainly be looking at that, and also working with the ore sort of people, particularly Toma in Sydney. They're a German company, but their Australian operations are in Sydney. And people will be familiar with them because they're the guys who build the machines that sort your plastic bottles out from your metal cans and stuff. So the technology is used a lot in the environmental area, but they have some terrific modern techniques which didn't exist in the 80s when this project was originally done, using things like X-ray sorting and electrical sorting to pick out metallic rocks that contain metallic minerals from rocks that don't. So that can turn what is a large low-grade deposit into a medium, very high-grade deposit. Because, as I said, the big cost is the processing. And from an environmental point of view, that type of processing doesn't use any chemicals, doesn't use any water. It's just using the physical properties of the rocks. So all you have to do is crush it relatively coarse, inch to 4 inch size, and you're sorting at that size. So and sometimes, and I mean, it might be a bit out there, but you create a byproduct which is basically a gravel which you can sell. So that's there's a lot of advantages in it.
Yeah, so interesting, all the different ways that you can sort of monetize and capitalize. And you mentioned the government funding side. Glen Eden is very scale. It's a massive scale project, company making project potentially, and it's the largest undeveloped tungsten project in New South Wales. And so you'd think there'd be sort of strategic advantages, or at least a very strong position for Terra Uranium to potentially get funding outside of equities. That's non-dilutionary for shareholders as well with a small company.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's also just once you, as the guys at Taronga did, they got major project status, and that makes a big difference because it means you're dealing directly with the premiers and state development. And they then help through the permitting process of dealing with all the other arms of government. So just that whole process, it does help a lot.
Yeah, and it is
so we'd certainly be looking to do that. Sorry?
And it is, sorry, Andrew, it is critically important for Australia to, to have these sort of development projects.
Yeah, and it creates jobs and it creates wealth for the country. And we know the demand's there. And as I said, particularly in Europe, as the rest of the US and Africa and Asia are all going internal, Europe are realising that they're very short of metals. So we know other projects have support. Well, First Tin, for instance, is a European company, and so they're already in the area. We're an Australian company. We're very friendly with them. Who knows where it'll lead?
Yeah, fantastic, Andrew. Now, I just have one final question for you, which is the same as always. And
yes.
Really just summarize, and maybe in the context of this acquisition as well, what are 2 to 3 really key investment highlights for investors to understand about this acquisition being strategic for the company and just as a whole? What do you want to leave with our investors today?
Yeah, I think the 3 points are that we've moved into tin and tungsten as critical minerals, and now moly and bismuth as well, coming out of the same geological systems. It's building on the sort of approach we used in Canada, where we were looking for potentially world-class deposits. The advantages of these ones, of course, is they're closer to home and they're shallower, so we can drill those easily within our own budgets. And we believe that they are complementary. They're all in the critical mineral space, and it's a potentially company maker. It's a really, really good project. We're very excited about it.
Yeah, fantastic, Andrew. As always,
watch this space, as they say.
Yes, absolutely. I think we were saying this last time as well. The company's really had quite the transformation, so it's really interesting to chat to you and to see that transformation. The company's still called Terra Uranium, but you've added quite a diverse portfolio, all strategic minerals and metals. But yeah, as always, it's wonderful to chat to you, Andrew, and really looking forward to seeing how your exploration program goes with this project in particular.
Thanks very much, Jess. It's a pleasure to talk to you again.